where the other deathless gods were kept back from battle. I just want to point out the genius of this poem. That is just a very brief set of lines that basically says that Asclepius was killed, a son of Ares. Now all of a sudden Hera comes back and says, we're all going through it. And even Ares, I mean, look, he lost his son. I mean, fighting words, we're told. Back now to the reading of 137. And Ares pounded his sturdy thighs. We get this one, by the way, where they'll slap on their thighs like they're ready to, okay, I'm going to do something. Pounding his sturdy thighs with the flats of both hands and let loose in grief. Now it's Ares' turn to say something. Now, you gods of Olympus, who could blame me now if I descend on Achaea's ships to avenge my son, my butchered son? Even if fate will crush me, we're thinking here of Zeus, striking me down with the thunderbolt of Zeus, sprawled in the blood and dust with dead men's corpses. With that he called his henchmen rout and terror to yoke his team as the god strapped on his shining gear. And now we're ready for Ares's Aristide. I mean, if we had Hera's Aristide in the last one, right, where she dressed up and got all doodadded up so that she could seduce Zeus. Here we've got Ares who's ready to go and jack somebody. Namely, of course, some of the people, who the Trojans who are responsible for the death of his son, right? Well, it's going to be Athena who will say to Ares, I don't think this is what you really want to do. And, she talks reason into him. Then it will be Iris who will go and tell Poseidon, hey, listen, the time has come. And Poseidon will have the same kind of response. What are you talking about? He will say, Zeus is not my superior. And then we get this very fascinating bit of information where we find out that, in fact, the world was divided among three brothers. Of course, Poseidon took the sea, Hades took the underworld, and Zeus the sky, and of course everything else. And he is King God. And finally, Poseidon will hear from Iris, because he tells Iris, you go back and tell Zeus, I ain't having none of it. And Iris, we're told at line 238 or so, Iris, quick as the breezes, tried to soothe Poseidon. And she says, wait, god of the sea blue mane who grips the earth, you really want me to take that harsh, unbending answer back to Zeus? No change of heart, not even a little? The hearts of the great, can always change. You know how the Furies always stand by older brothers. The Lord of the earthquake yielded ground and answer. True, Iris, immortal friend, how right you are. It's a fine thing when a messenger knows what's proper. But how it galls me, it wounds me to the quick when the father tries to revile me with brute abuse. His equal in rank, our fated shares of the world the same. Still, this time, I will yield for all my outrage. By the way, let's just pause for a moment and pay attention to the fact that, the genius of this poem. In the opening book of the Iliad, we have two equals in Achilles and Agamemnon who go at each other and they cannot resolve their conflict. Here, Poseidon, just like before, with Ares, just like before, with Hera. We have a counterexample, that is to say, accepting the fact that Zeus has power. You could make the argument that here the poet is suggesting Achilles had another way to respond to the fact that Agamemnon took his, if you will, trophy. It's often translated as trophy, is it not? His, that is to say, teammate. His Scooby Snacks, namely, of course, his Briseis, right? But we're not done. At line 253, Poseidon says this, but I tell you this, he's speaking to Iris to go back and tell Zeus, and there's anger in my threat. If ever, against my will and Athena, queen of armies, Hera and Hermes, and the god of fire Hephaestus, if Zeus ever spares the towering heights of Troy, if he ever refuses to take her walls by force and give the Argive troops resounding triumph, let Zeus know this full well, the breach between us both will never heal. Well, in other words, Poseidon says, if Zeus changes his mind, because for Poseidon, this is the appearance, that Zeus is actually going to let the Trojans win this thing. And he says, if this happens, and the Trojans end up killing all these Greeks, and the walls of Troy don't come down, it'll never be right between the two of us. Of course, we already know, because Zeus has predicted already and told us, the walls of Troy, in fact, will come down, and Troy itself will fall. Right? By the way, there's a story that's kind of precedent to all of this that says that when the Trojans built their huge wall, their huge city, they failed to sacrifice correctly to the god Poseidon. And he was kind of like angry about this fact. And so he willed that someday all of Troy would in fact be destroyed. So he says, I'll yield. The next movement is Apollo taking care of Hector. He shows up and he will kind of taunt him. He'll say, Hector, at line 290, son of Priam, why so far from your troops? Sitting here half dead, some troubles come your way? You'll love this irony, right, of Apollo. What's wrong with you? You know, that kind of thing. Hector struggled for words, his helmet flashing. Who are you, my lord? Who of the high gods to probe me face to face? Haven't you heard? I was killing his friends against the ships when the lord of the war cry, Ajax, struck me down with a boulder square across my chest. He took the fight right out of me, I can tell you. I thought for certain I'd go to join the dead, descend to the house of death. This very day, I thought, I'd breathe my last. But Lord Apollo, the distant deadly archer, reassured him. Courage! Look what a strong support the son of Kronos speeds from Ida to take your side and chill you. I am Phobos Apollo, Lord of the Golden Sword. I who saved you before, and along with you, your towering city too. So up now, Hector. Command your drivers here in all their hundreds to lash their plunging teams at the hollow ships. And I'll surge on ahead, clearing the whole way for the team's assault. I'll bend the Argives back. And Apollo then will say, let's go to work. We then will have just absolute chaos, right? Hector shows up, and it will be left to the Greek warrior Thaus to make an observation about what it is that's going on. At line 340, a few lines above 340, he says it this way. Now for Theos came with calls back to his comrades, the Greeks. Look, a genuine miracle right before my eyes. Hector's escaped again. He's risen from the dead. And just as each of us hoped with all his heart, he'd dropped and died at the hands of great Ajax. But again, some god swoops down and saves this Hector. And isn't he wiped enough of us out already? Now he'll make more slaughter. Well, I know. He'd never be in the front smashing our lines unless old Thunder Zeus had put him on his feet. So, come friends, do as I say. All take my lead. The rank and file go back, withdraw to the ships, but we who claim to be the army's finest champions stand our ground. Face him first, try to beat him off. Spears at the ready. For all his fury, trust me, he'll quake before he penetrates our front. So you've got this fascinating line about he's risen from the dead. I mean, he was dead and now he's back again. You know, this kind of movement, right? Hector then will attack, and he will attack not just the Greeks. He will attack his own Trojans as well. At line 405 or so, he says, we're told, while the Trojans tore the war gear off the bodies, Argives clambered back in a tangled mass, scrambling back through the sharp stakes, deep pit of the trench, fleeing left and right, forced inside the rampart. So Hector commanded his Trojans, sounding out, now storm the ships, drop those bloody spoils. Any straggler I catch hanging back from the fleet, right here on the spot, I'll put that man to death. No kin, no woman commit his corpse to the flames. The dogs will tear his flesh before our walls. The ironies, of course, run deep at 2B. Hector says, if I see anybody not participating in our attack on the ships of the Greeks, I will kill him myself, and I will not allow him proper burial. I will allow the dogs to eat his body, which is, of course, exactly how the Iliad will end. Yes? Achilles will not allow for the proper burial of Hector, and he will turn dogs loose on the body until, of course, Priam will come to rescue. Yes? Apollo, then, we are told, will participate in destroying the walls that have been created on the rampart and filling up, in fact, the trench as well. We have this amazing simile, as I talked about, the 202 similes of the Iliad, and I said to you that fully 164 of them have to do with battle. Here is a classic example of that. Holding formation now, I'm at line 425 or so. Holding formation now, the Trojans roll across it. Apollo heading them, gripping the awesome storm shield, and he tore that Argive rampart down with the same ease some boy at the seashore knocks sand castles down. It's an amazing simile. In the same way that a child walks and you have this huge elaborate castle and he just kicks it over, that's how Apollo destroys all of the ramparts that the Greeks worked so hard to build and now are, of course, hoping that can defend them. He no sooner builds his playthings up, child's play, then he wrecks them all with hands and kicking feet. Just so, for the sport of it, God of the wild, cry Apollo, so You wrecked the Achaeans' work. It's interesting again. In the poem, every once in a while, the poet, speaker, will drop into the second person as if he's telling the poem to Apollo. So you wrecked the Achaeans' work and drove the men who had built it up with all that grief and labor into headlong panic rout. We're going to make some observations at the end of our lecture about the idea that the Iliad suggests men build and gods destroy, right? We even have a prayer coming from Nestor at line 435 or so, because it's coming to the end. I mean, the poet wants to give us a real sense in a Greek poem about how close it came to the Greeks all being annihilated. Nestor, rapt. Now, he will make some observations. Father Zeus, he prays, if ever in Argos's golden wheatlands one of us burned the fat thighs of sheep or bulls and begged a safe return, and you promised with a nod, remember it now, Olympian. Save us from this ruthless day. Don't let these Trojans mow us down in droves. So he pleaded. And hearing the old man's prayers, Zeus, who rules the world, let loose a great crack of thunder, rending the skies. In other words, Nestor prays to Zeus, will you please remember that you promised that you were going to give us victory here, and all of a sudden you got this amazing thunderclap that happens. But, we're told, the Trojans, thrilled at the sound of Zeus's thunder, pitched themselves at the Argives still more fiercely, summoning up their fiery lust for battle. Note the irony. In other words, Nestor prays, Zeus provides a response, but it's all about how that response is interpreted, right? So for Nestor, he would say, oh, okay, Zeus heard me. Whew, good. But for the Trojans, they're like, Zeus is giving us the ascension, and the thunder proves it. In other words, the same exact sign can be interpreted in two different ways. Then we have a very brief moment in Book 15 with Patroclus. Everything about Patroclus is, of course, really tragic, but let's take a look at 455. Now, as long as the armies fought to take the rampart, far from the fast ships, Patroclus sat it out in his friend Eurypylus' shelter, trying to lift the soldier's heart with stories. We think back to, of course, his pal Achilles singing stories of the fallen warriors, applying soothing drugs. He, of course, learned about these drugs from Achilles, to his dreadful wound. So he sought to calm the black waves of pain. So Patroclus is doing his best to help this wounded warrior. But as soon as he heard the Trojans storm the wall and shouts rise from Achaeans lost in panic rout, Patroclus gave a groan, and slapping his thighs, we're back to the slapping thighs again, hard, with the fists of both hands, burst forth in anguish, I can't stay here with you any longer, Eurypylus. Much as you need me. There, a great battle breaks. No, let an aid attend you here while I rush back to Achilles, spur him into combat. Who knows? With a god's help, I just might rouse him now, bring his fighting spirit round at last. The persuasion of a comrade has its powers. Well, the ironies, of course, run very, very deep, don't they? That is to say, Patroclus says, I'm going to go back and tell Achilles he needs to enter the war. Enough of this. We know how this thing's going to unfold, though, don't we, right? Yeah, we do. And in Book 16, it will be Patroclus who will enter for Achilles in his armor. And, of course, we know, because Zeus has already said it in this book, what will happen next. We finish this Book 15 with a remarkable bit of exchange. I'm going to call it epic dialogue. Now, what do I mean by that when I teach this book? What I mean is the poet has a movement that for the Greeks is represented by the work of Ajax. Ajax the larger, not Ajax the smaller, as we finished with the last book. Ajax the larger. We've seen this already, where Ajax and Hector are going at it, back and forth, in a series of both actions and more particularly words. I'm going to work through this really quickly just to kind of give you a sense of how this works. First, Ajax. At line 555 or so, he says it this way. Maybe he's talking to a Greek. Maybe they've whipped us here, but not without a fight will they take our beach ships. Call up the joy of war. Tusius has lost his arrows, and he says, we're not giving up. No matter what happens, we're not giving up. Then we have the response of Hector. But, we're told at line 565, Hector, seeing Teuce's arrows in disarray, the great archer has lost his arrows, let fly a resounding shout to all of his units. So For every comment made by Ajax, we're going to have a return comment made by Hector. Trojans, Lycians, Dardan fighters, hand to hand. Fight like men, my friends. Call up your battle fury. Make for the hollow ships. I see with mine own eyes how Zeus has blocked their finest archers' arrows. Easy to see what help Zeus lends to mortals, either to those he gives surpassing glory, or those he saps and wastes, refuses to defend, just as he wastes the Argives' power, but backs us now. So, fight by the ships altogether. And that comrade who meets his death and destiny, smeared or stabbed, let him die. He dies, fighting for fatherland. No dishonor there. He'll leave behind him wife and sons unscathed, his house and estate unharmed, once those Argives sail for home, the fatherland they love. This is fascinating stuff. In other words, Hector reminds them why they're fighting. That obviously they're defending their fatherland, and also, Kleos, if you die, we will remember you afterwards for saving the fatherland. Right? Of course, the fact that fatherland is used reminds us as well, right, about that whole notion that the Iliad has been a poem about fathers, especially fathers and sons, right? Ajax is the next in his response, right? He will say to his soldiers about Hector, can't you hear him calling his armies on full force, this Hector, wild to gut our hulls with fire? He's not inviting them to dance, believe me. He commands them into battle. No better tactics now than to fight them hand to hand with all our fury. That's Ajax, right? Let's go. We got to go hand to hand. We then will have the response of Hector. And I'm at line 645 or so, right? Hector will say, follow me. No more standing back, no fighting these Argives at a distance. Kill them hand to hand. Now, before they topple towering Ilium down, all our people slaughtered. In other words, now's the time. Ironic. If we don't take them now, Troy will fall. Of course, they won't take them now, and ultimately Troy will fall, and all of Hector's people will be slaughtered. Of course, that will happen after his death, right? So with a shout, we're told, he surged ahead, and his gallant cohort followed. But, now we're back to the other side. But great Ajax spurred his Argives on. Quote, be men, my friends. Discipline fill your hearts. In other words, they're all coming at him. Don't run. Be disciplined. Dread what comrades say of you here in bloody combat. We're back to Kleos. When men dread that, more men come through alive. When soldiers break and run, goodbye glory, goodbye all defenses. So notice again, this will be Ajax's comment that we've got to make sure that we are fighting for the right thing, right? Finally, we have Hector on the attack at line 705 or so. The foam flecked from Hector's mouth and his eyes shot flame glaring under his shaggy brows and round his head. His helmet shook and clashed, a terrible wild din. Hector on the attack, and high in the clear sky Zeus himself defended his champion. Hector alone he prized and glorified among hordes of men, for Hector's life would be cut short so soon. An amazing line, right? In other words, Zeus is giving him this ascendancy, knowing full well that it won't be long, and Hector will be jacked. Why? Even now Athena was speeding the fatal day when he, Hector, would fall to the power of great Achilles. But now he was bent on breaking men, probing the lines wherever he saw the largest mass and the finest gear, but he could not smash through yet for all his fury. Because the Greeks closed ranks and packed like a stone wall. But Hector, we're told at line 723, all afire, blazing head to foot, charged at their main force, bursting down as a wave bursts down on a veering ship, down from under it, under the clouds it batters, bred by gale forces, a classic epic simile here. Showers of foam overwhelm the whole, blotted all from sight, the hurricane's killing blast thundering into the sails, and scudding clear of death by the skin of their teeth, the sailors quake, their hearts race on with terror. So the Achaeans' courage quaked, and Hector lunged again like a murderous lion, another simile, mad for kills, charging cattle, grazing across the flats of a broad marshy pasture, flocks by the hundred led by an unskilled herdsman, helpless to keep the marauder off, a longhorn heifer. No fighting, that bloody slaughter. All he can do is keep pace with the lead or straggling heads, leaving the center free for the big cat's pounce, and it eats a heifer raw as the rest stampede away. And so the Achaeans stampeded away. Now, unearthly terror. All of them routed now by Father Zeus and Hector, though Hector killed just one. And then we'll go with one more killing of Hector. Periphetes, the Mycenae, a favorite son of Corpus, we're told, will die. It's interesting, this death, however, is going to happen because he will stumble, Periphetes will stumble on his own shield as he's trying to get away. And Hector, we're told, he stumbled now at line 751. He stumbled over it now, the shield, pitched back, helmet clanging harshly against his brows as the man hit the ground. But Hector marked him at once, rushed up to his side, and staked a spear in his chest to kill the fighter, right in the eyes of loyal comrades standing by, sick for their friend. But what could they do? Nothing. Just shake with dread in the face of mighty Hector. By the end of this thing, we've got Ajax at the ships. We have Hector screaming at line 830 as he says it, screams it to the Trojans, bring fire. So they're there. They're at the ships. Up with the war cries all together. Now Zeus hands us a day worth all the rest. Today we seize these ships. They stormed ashore against the will of the gods. They came here frightened with years of pain they came here freighted with years of pain for us, and all thanks to our city elders. What cowards! Whenever I longed to fight at the ship's high sterns, the old men kept me back. We go back to the old men who were sitting there on the walls of Troy in the earlier book of the Iliad when we met. You'll maybe remember that famous scene, right, with Helen talking with Priam there on the walls of Troy. Who is that and who is that, and all of that going down, right? And Hector says, they're all cowards. They never let me do what I wanted to do and storm the ships. By the way, you wonder if